Hail to legal warriors. Did you ever want to know the truth about fines in the criminal justice system? How much are they? Does the court even care? Do they get to keep the money? And how do they work? Well, if you're interested in this area of the law, stay tuned. This is the video for you. My name is Attorney Lance Fryrear. I'm a defense attorney in Linwood, Washington. My law firm's been defending people charged with crimes all throughout Washington State for more than 20 years, and I'm putting out these videos to help educate the public. So if you find this useful, please like and please subscribe. More people get the help they need. I'm just going to jump right into it. Fines in the criminal justice system. Okay, I've been a defense attorney for 23 years. I was a prosecutor for 7 years, and happily, when I was a prosecutor, that's where I got the inside information about how fines really work in the criminal system in Washington State. And most people know that if someone gets charged with a crime, there's going to be a maximum fine. For gross misdemeanors, the maximum is a $5,000 fine. For simple misdemeanors, a $1,000 fine. And for felonies, it can be much, much larger for maximum fine amounts. And we get phone calls. It's like people are worried about how much the fine is going to be. And if you're an attorney in the system, what you realize is that for the most part, the court doesn't really care about the fine amount. If you ever sit through a court calendar and if you watch people who get convicted of crimes, the fines might be $150 or $250 or $500. And that doesn't seem like a lot when most of the maximum penalties are $5,000. And so why is that? Why is the court not concerned about handing out large fines? I think the reason why the court isn't concerned about that is the court does not get to keep the money. It's even worse. The court has the obligation to collect the money, and most of the money they collect has to be sent to the state, right? They don't get to keep the money to pay their court staff, right? Think how many people it takes to run a court. There's a budget they have, and based upon the budget is set upon a certain number of cases, and they can't predict ahead of time how many cases will get filed into court. So the court doesn't get to keep, for the most part, the fine money, but the little secret is they do get to keep the large majority of probation costs. And so probation costs are oftentimes the lion's share of the amount of money that someone owes the court after they're found guilty of a crime. And so there's a fine, which is a small amount usually, plus court costs, which is a much larger amount if we're tacking on probation costs as well. So what's an example? Well, an example might be a DUI charge. Let's say, for sake of argument, the minimum penalty is a $350 fine for a DUI. Well, there's going to be some mandatory costs that get tacked on, right? There's about 110% of any fine gets tacked on top of that for a public safety and education assessment. It changes from time to time, but think about it. About 110% gets tacked on. So on 350, they would tack on another $385. There might be a breath test fee, whether or not you took a breath test on a DUI. There's going to be a criminal conviction fee if we're convicted of something. And there's also going to be a probation cost. And many district courts have probation costs of something like $65 a month. On DUI probation, that would be 60 months of probation, 60, times $65, right? So that's going to be, 60 times 10 would be 600, 6 times that, right? So $3,600 plus in probation costs it could be if you had the maximum probation cost for the entire time. So it's not the fine that we're worried about so much when we're worried about total costs. We're worried about probation costs, okay? So what can we do to lower our total obligation to the court, fine plus costs? Well, what we often do in my office is we make sure that our clients, if we're going to have a conviction, we try to avoid that. But if there's a conviction, we try to make sure our clients have done all the affirmative or the required steps ahead of time before we ever have a resolution of the case where they might be sentenced. Because many courts will not put someone on a full probation if there's nothing left for their probation department to monitor. What's an example? Well, for a DUI, for example, we're all going to have to do an alcohol and drug evaluation and follow up with any required treatment classes. as required by the results of the evaluation. We might also have to do a DUI victims panel. So if those things are not done at the time of sentencing already, then the court has no choice but to put somebody on active probation, if they have a probation department, to make sure those things get done, and they're going to charge money for that. However, if at the time we have a sentencing in the case, we hand up the evaluation, we hand up the victims panel, and we hand up the proof of the treatment, hopefully just alcohol drug information school, then the court can say, hey, good job. I'm not going to give you full probation, which costs more money. I'm going to give you maybe something called a record check probation. Maybe that costs only $20 a month, right? And that means you're not going to see a probation officer, and it's going to save you $45 a month for however long probation is. That could be up to 60 months. That's like $2,500, right? So a $350 fine might end up costing you $3,000, $4,000 by the time they tack on court costs, unless we do things smart, right? And that's just one example. Non-DUIs and non-domestic violence convictions, the maximum probation time for a non-felony gross misdemeanor is only 24 months, okay? And if you don't end up with a conviction of a crime, there might be much less court costs to be tacked on to a fine. So let's talk about when we're done, our fine and costs add up to a certain amount. Now, do we have to pay that all right then and there? And almost always the answer is no. We do not need to pay it all right then and there when we get the resolution of the case. Usually the court is going to put us on some type of payment plan. And that payments may be made to the court, or it may be made to an agency the court has outsourced to collect payments to free up time from their very valuable court staff. That's usually going to be so much money a month, and oftentimes they don't want you to pay anything right then and there that day. So if, let's say, you owe $400 total, they might say pay $50 a month for 8 months, and that would get you to $400. And typically they're not going to charge interest. They may charge a credit card processing fee if you use a credit card, but you're typically going to be able to be put on a payment plan. And what if you miss a payment, right? Well, most courts, if you miss a payment and contact them, they might change your payment plan. But let's say you just forgot about it. You didn't pay it, or it's easier out of sight, out of mind. Now what? Well, they might send it to collections. And if they send your fines to collections, just like anything else in collections, it's going to increase the amount that you owe to the court, because the collections company is going to tack on their fees so they can pay their staff to try to get the money that you never paid the court that you were supposed to pay the court. What else can happen if we don't pay our fines? Well, if we don't pay our fines as a result of either a traffic ticket or any type of criminal traffic conviction, mainly what will happen is they can enter a failure to respond because we didn't pay our fines on the traffic matter. And at that point, the Department of Licensing is going to send you out a notice saying, hey, we're going to suspend your driver's license at a certain date in the future unless you pay these fines or get back on the payment plan. We don't want that to happen, because now if we get caught driving on a suspended license, we have a whole new crime that might trigger probation violations that very well could put us in jail just because we forgot or chose not to pay a fine. So if you get a notice in the mail, I want you to pay attention to it. Look at the date, and then get a hold of the court to figure out what you can arrange. Again, we do not want to end up with a suspended license because we didn't pay our tickets or our court fines. What else? What else can I tell you about money in the court? Well, restitution is treated a little bit differently. So that's not a court fine. It's not a court cost. Restitution is something that can be ordered in certain types of cases where the victim of the crime has out-of-pocket costs, right? They have medical bills, or there's damage to their car in a hit and run or a DUI that needs to be paid, or hopefully it's not a very expensive case like we can run into a telephone pole and the city wants their money for replacing the pole back. Well, restitution can be treated a lot more seriously. Typically, if you don't pay a fine, they're not going to put you in jail and issue a warrant for not paying a fine, but they might for not paying restitution, because that's money owed to a victim. So oftentimes if you owe fine money and restitution, when you make a payment to the court, they're going to apply your money first towards the restitution, towards the money that's owing to the alleged victim in the case. So take a restitution payment very seriously, because if you fail to pay restitution, you very much could get a notice in the mail telling you to appear for a review hearing where they're going to punish you for not paying the victim back for the damages that they have already found that you owe based upon the result in your particular case. Regarding fines, sometimes it's hard to know what you owe, right? Most courts aren't going to send you a bill. They're going to, put you on a payment plan and expect you to stick to it. So you want to inquire with the court about what's the easiest way to make payments. Is there a way you can make a payment online? Each court varies. Is there an auto payment you can get on with the court? Sometimes you can if there's an agency making a payment. And believe it or not, sometimes the court puts it on you and just gives you paperwork, say, hey, send this into the agency to set up your first payment by a certain date. And it's not the easiest thing in the world. I remember pre-COVID, I would spend a lot of time in court helping clients fill out payment plans because that's just what the court was doing. They were outsourcing things. And imagine if English isn't your first language, especially, that's going to be pretty hard to do. So the most interesting thing about fines is the fine amounts usually aren't that much, but it's the court costs that add up, and we can do things to control the court costs. Finally, what if you get charged with a felony? Right? They have much bigger maximum penalties, $10,000 fine max, $20,000 fine max. Oh my God, I'm going to lose my house, right? Wrong. Felonies are pretty strange. Let's hope you never find out, but usually they don't even issue a fine in a felony case. They usually issue a victim penalty assessment, something like $500. They sometimes do a DNA fee if we have to have a DNA, but they pretty much don't issue fines at all in felony court, and I think it's because they're not really set up to collect fines, right? The felony court itself typically doesn't have its own probation department. They rely on the Department of Corrections for people put on community custody, a fancy word for probation, and that's statutory. It's not discretionary like it is in the non-felony land. In non-felony land, in gross misdemeanors, simple misdemeanors, the judge can do whatever they want regarding probation. In the felony court, strangely, even though the charges are more serious, the judges are more limited in what they can do, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but that's the way it works here in Washington State. So I think the bottom line is that for fines, they're not going to be as bad as you think. Talk to your attorney about what you can do to minimize your costs. Usually your most expensive part of any case is going to be that attorney, if you're hiring one, to try to help you stay out of jail, protect your record, protect your future. And usually they're going to help lower your total cost. Also, consider that as another positive return on your investment in getting good legal help. So if you found this useful, please like and please subscribe. More people will get the help they need. And more importantly, if you have a criminal matter in Washington State, feel free to reach out to my firm. If we get on board, we'll listen to what happened, we'll identify a way forward, and we will be there for you. Thank you.